We are always so excited. Jess is an amazing team member at Red, Wine, and Blue, but she has also been involved in politics for, what, I think 15, maybe 20 years?
20.
20, okay. 20 years. She's worked on everything from all the way up the level to presidential campaigns. Used to have a Sirius XM radio show called Signal Boost, and she is a messaging guru. We are always thrilled to have her here to present. So, Jess, I'll let you round out your bio there. Anything else you want to say, and then we will get going.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sorry that I did the math on that, but it is actually 21 years that I have been working in political campaigns. And let me tell you, it has only gotten weirder. So that is why I am here to talk to you, because literally the only thing that is going to save democracy is you. It's people like you having conversations with the people that you love and trust. You may have noticed that trust is in short supply in this country right now. This sort of we measure a thing called institutional trust. The same Pew or Gallup, I don't remember which entity does it, measures how much people trust various institutions, the government, media, higher education, you name it. Those numbers are as low as they have ever been. That is very much contributing to the polarization that we're all feeling. People talk a lot about how there's no Walter Cronkite anymore. There's like no one set of facts that we all agree on. That trust has really eroded. And so the way that we combat that is with our personal relationships, with our personal networks. So like I said, I've been doing political campaigns for 20 years. It used to be very much about who you could reach on with your cable advertising, with your television advertising, how many people watch debates. That landscape has become incredibly fractured. It is very hard to command attention, and even harder to get folks to believe you if they don't know who you already are. And that is why friend-to-friend organizing matters so very, very much. I am not being hyperbolic when I say that that is what's going to save democracy. Every time Red, Wine, and Blue brings in somebody who is an expert in authoritarianism or what might be happening right now, they all say the same thing. The way to get out of this is to be neighbors and friends and share our values with each other and support each other. The bad guys sort of depend on us not liking each other or not trusting each other. And the way that we combat that is by having tough conversations. So I do communications. That's the role on a campaign I've always had. The press secretary or the communications director. If you watched West Wing, I would be a CJ. And now I help folks like you have these conversations. And so the first thing that I want to do is sort of ground us in a little bit of reality, because what happens in this, really very polarized landscape is that it becomes easy to see or to think of ideas as particularly controversial. Issues as very controversial. Lots of issues are presented as controversial that are actually like supported by a fairly large majority. So we're gonna ground ourselves in just a little bit of reality before we get started learning how to have these conversations. So reproductive rights. You may have noticed that pretty much whenever abortion access and rights is on the ballot, it wins, whether that's Montana or Oklahoma or Vermont or Hawaii. That is because this is a very popular issue. We have more consensus on this issue than we do on most things that we don't even think of as controversial. Things like public roads, fire departments, that kind of stuff. 90% support legal birth control. So we know that no matter how you ask this question, the number comes up a little bit different. It's always around 6 or 7 out of 10 people support legal abortion. The number that really never changes is the one that wants total abortion bans, like absolutely no abortions anywhere for any reason. That number is always in the single digits. And that's the agenda that we're up against now. So finding common ground on this issue is probably as easy as talking to the person next to you, whether you know them or not. 6% is a pretty small number. You're not going to get a ton of people who firmly believe that it should be illegal in all cases. The vast majority of us think the opposite. Same with LGBTQ issues. We're actually at an all-time high for marriage equality. 71% support it. We've never seen numbers like that. It's becoming more and more accepted. I think we've all watched that happen over the last decade, I think. I'm very excited about the second bullet here, which is that 64% strongly believe that transgender people should be protected from discrimination. Trans issues have become a real lightning rod. Like, that is the thing that we are being told is the most controversial thing out there. Now, do I think 64% of Americans understand trans issues or know a trans person? Absolutely not. The vast majority of Americans, I think, are not comfortable talking about it. They don't feel like experts. They don't know how to weigh in. But you know what they do know? Just because they don't understand something doesn't mean they're afraid of it. Just because you might not understand somebody's gender identity doesn't mean you think they should be discriminated against. And I think this is a big difference between us and the other side. When they don't understand something, it really scares them. So 64% of Americans, and that's 64%, they're not coming at this from I'm a super educated person on this issue. They just don't believe in discrimination. And I'm sure that if we asked this question a little bit differently and we asked about trans kids and bullying in school, that number would be even higher. So don't think about it as I have to know everything about this issue in order to engage on it. It's about decency. It's about respect. It's about basic concepts like fairness. And frankly, there's a lot more consensus on that than you would be led to see. Education issues, I mean, this is just kind of a no-brainer. Nobody likes book bans. Absolutely nobody. If you're not a member of Moms for Liberty, you are not saying yes to book bans. Everybody understands that sex ed is important. 98% of people support it in high school. That's everybody. So you can be reasonably sure that if you are engaging on educational issues, and we talking about your schools all the time, it's one of the best ways into these conversations, especially when you're a parent that shares kids with the person that you are talking to. You have kids going to the same school in the same neighborhood. Vast majority of people want a well-rounded education that includes talking about US history, even the less good parts of it. Vast majority of people want kids to be able to go to school and learn how to succeed in the 21st century in the global world. It is actually a very, very small minority of people that want to restrict what kids are learning or ban books like Toni Morrison or make sure or teach abstinence only or take sex ed out. Very, very, very small minority there. You may have them in your town, and we will talk more about that later. I don't mean to dismiss it. I just mean to make you feel a little more comfortable striking up that conversation with someone that you haven't had these sort of values talks with yet. You are likely to find somebody who at least shares a little bit of common agreement, and that's really all you need. Gun violence prevention is another one we are told is controversial, but over 60% favor a ban on assault weapons. Like, that's an outright ban. That's a fairly large regulation right there that still has majority support. Most gun owners have support for gun safety legislation. 80% favor background checks. That's like a majority of the NRA members favor background checks. So as long as we stick to what we're actually talking about, we're going to find a lot of common ground. We're going to find a lot of ways to engage on this. So I just wanted to sort of demystify how difficult it is to talk about these issues. I do not want you to cite these statistics in your conversations. We'll talk a little more about how to have them, but if you are citing statistics, you are not bringing your best argument. I'm presenting these just so you know that the person that you're talking to at drop-off is likely to be with you on a lot of these fundamental values. It has nothing to do with partisanship. We are not talking about we're talking about values. So why does it seem so controversial? Why does the opposition feel so loud? Well, it's a strategy. There is a reason why the anti-mask protests looked exactly like the anti-CRT protests, looked exactly like the anti-sex ed protests, look exactly like whatever is happening, you will notice. I mean, you probably all know this. It's the same people, even. It's the same people with the same t-shirts, it's the same language, it's the same messaging. Well, it's also the same money. It's these groups right here are a really good sort of example of the way that the right, the extremists, stand up these organizations to make it look like there is grassroots movement where really there is a lot of funding. Moms for Liberty is sort of a perfect example of that. Trouble Nation already has 4 or 5 times the number of chapters and certainly did not have the funding to get it started. So that is all for you guys. Thank you so much for doing that. These other groups are often there to lend a veneer of credibility to something that is otherwise not credible. You'll see things like the Medical Institute for Sexual Health, which absolutely makes it sound like it is a medical institute, maybe even for sexual health. But you will find instead right-wing talking points there. So that's why it feels like this, because there are these outside groups and they are very heavily invested in confusing and scaring people. And they do that because they want to retain power. They want to score partisan points. They want to remain in office, and in order to do that, they need us frightened. They need us confused. They need us divided. They need us not talking to each other, because when we talk to each other, we find all of that common ground that I was talking about. The metaphor that I use for these groups is one of a stadium, where if I walk into a stadium and everybody's cheering, but this one section is booing, it's pretty obvious what's going on. I can tell. Vast majority of the stadium is cheering. Those guys are upset. Got it. But if I give all of the booing people megaphones and then I scatter them throughout the stadium, when I walk in, I can't tell. It just sounds like chaos. I can't tell that the booers are smaller numbers than the cheerers. And that's what these groups do. They make it very difficult to see the majority for what it is. And that's because we are powerful when we can tell that. So let's get into it. How do we fight back? This is the only slide in the entire presentation that is counterintuitive, and it is really counterintuitive. So this is one you're going to have to practice. If you have more questions about it, let's talk about it after. This is the one that's tough, because the human brain doesn't really work like this. Don't repeat the disinformation. That's not just don't share lies with your friends. This is the kind of thing where if somebody is coming at you about, let's go to guns, right? We know that 80% of everybody wants background checks. We know that almost anybody you're talking to is going to be pro background check, right? So when the person you're talking to says, I'm just afraid that Democrats are taking our guns away, you might want to respond, no one is taking away your guns. We just want background checks, which is a completely normal, rational, accurate thing to say. However, when we wind up saying they're taking away guns, no one's taking away guns, two things are happening. One, the brain remembers the salacious charge more than it remembers the accurate information. So that's now in your head. Taking away guns is now a thing that is part of the gun discourse in your mind. And the second thing is a lot more insidious, and that is that we lose the opportunity to make the points that we actually want to make. We want to talk about our own lived experience. We want to talk about our values. And if I spend the 5 minutes that I have talking to this person debating whether or not it's true that someone's coming to your house to take away your guns, I haven't gotten to say anything about why I care so much about this issue. I haven't talked about my kids. I haven't talked about my experience. I haven't talked about what's coming up in the state legislature that I wanted them to know to vote on. I haven't talked about any of that. All I've done is debate a thing that isn't true. A really good, really sad example of this is from 2024 in the debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, when he told an absolutely disgusting lie about the Haitian community of Springfield, Ohio. I'm not going to repeat it here because I'm not going to do that, but I know that everybody on this call knows exactly what I'm talking about. And the sad thing is, as we spent the next few weeks debating or even discussing what a terrible lie that was, what an awful thing to say about a community. Like, can you believe? And then the memes started and the jokes, and like, yes, it was kind of funny. It could, you could easily make fun of it. We spent 2 weeks talking about the Haitian community doing something that no one is doing, instead of talking about all of the reasons why Donald Trump wasn't right to win that election, all of the things that people needed to know about Project 2025. It was an enormous distraction, one, so that's one of the biggest reasons not to do it. And two, it forever in your brain, when you hear Haitian community, that's going to come up in there. And that's awful. That's disgusting. We don't want that. And we don't want to help spread it. So part of what's so tough about disinformation is that, like, it wants you to help spread it. I think about it as a virus a lot. Like it wants community spread. It is being fed to you in a way that like debate me. And then the longer you spend debating it, the more power it gets. So don't repeat the disinformation. When somebody says something that isn't true, people are coming to take away my guns, you can just say, no, that's not true. What we want is background checks. I don't think that's accurate. There's a lot of bad information out there. All of that is absolutely fine to say. You're just not going to repeat the exact lie. We're not going to ignore the disinformation because, again, people want to know why they're hearing stuff that isn't true. And the reason is there are people who are heavily invested in confusing you. So it's okay to say that. Look, there's a lot of bad information out there. The truth is, there are some outside groups that are heavily invested in confusing people in order to score political points. But this second bullet is really helpful for keeping a tough conversation on track. We believe our kids are more important than politics. Whenever you are talking about your own lived experience, you are on as safe a ground as possible. And when somebody starts to pull a conversation towards national politics, they want to talk about what Trump did. They want to talk about, what something they've read in the news. They want to talk about a political fight. We believe our kids are more important than politics, can recenter that and just make it, we're not talking about Washington, we're talking about our school district. We believe our kids are more important than politics. Don't be afraid to stand up for your beliefs. It is, as we find common ground, it is absolutely important to share the values that you bring. Every one of our schools includes students who are LGBTQ, and they deserve an education that speaks to them. That is a thing that you can bring to the conversation regardless of what you're hearing in response. You can have a conversation with somebody who has heard misinformation and still lead with your values. The second sentence of that first bullet I find very important because even if you don't think that it matters so much that gay kids have an education that speaks to them, multiple studies have shown that learning in an environment that treats everyone with respect actually makes the environment safer for all kids. So your straight kid is less likely to be bullied in a school that treats gay kids with respect. So if you want to say that as one of the reasons why you believe what you believe, go ahead and lean into it. If you believe that we need gun safety legislation because it's common sense to keep guns away from violent criminals and keeping our kids safe is more important than politics, lean into that. I'm sure everybody here has had conversations about reproductive freedom because that's the kind of thing that we need to be talking about right now. And I know that you all have done some really amazing work in ballot initiatives and otherwise. So lean into why you believe the things that you believe. It's important, it's important for you to have values and principles, and note that none of this has to do with partisan politics or candidates or anything like that. We're mostly talking about kids. So let's talk about having the conversation. And we're going to start with who to have it with. So we're dividing people up a little bit here. We're going to call this the opposition. The opposition are people who are basically paid to believe elsewise. There's no way to get to them. They are the ones everybody has one in their life. This is somebody who really likes to own the libs. This is somebody who's yelling at your school board meeting. This is somebody in a Moms for Liberty shirt. This is that uncle that just wants to get under your skin. This is that guy at work. Like you know who we're talking about here. This is not somebody who you might have a few disagreements with, but you can talk in good faith. This is not that. We know who we're talking about here. I'm here to tell you it's okay to just not engage with them. If they're one of the 6% of Americans that think that abortion should be illegal in all cases, we don't need them. It's okay to let that go. The thing that really matters is your mental health, is your ability to keep having these conversations. That matters so much more than the incremental progress you might make with somebody who is heavily invested in a lot of lies. If that engagement depletes you and you can't have the next 5 conversations because that was so frustrating, they've won. So don't engage. Don't engage. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your energy. I talk a lot for this as an example about the change my mind guy. I think everybody has probably seen this meme. It's a man sitting with a folding chair and table in a public park, and he's got some incendiary phrase written on it, and it says "change my mind." The phrase that I saw first was "women are bad drivers, change my mind," and I chuckled because it would be so easy, right? It's so easy to knock down that piece of disinformation. Our car insurance is lower. That's it. That's all you need. In the same way that a 40-year-old's car insurance is lower than a 20-year-old's because they're better drivers, women's car insurance is lower than men's. The car insurance lobby is not slave to a woke agenda. That's just stats. It's just math. So I could very easily stop in front of this man's little folding chair and table and decimate his stupid argument with my single sentence. Would I change his mind? No. Would I stop him from setting up his little folding chair and table in another park the next day with the same exact sign? Nope. If we got into it, if we got into a huge back and forth in the park, would he be happy with that interaction? Yes, he would. So I'm going to ignore that man. Now, the only reason, and this requires you to know a little bit about yourself. Are you the kind of person who enjoys this kind of conflict? I kind of am. I'm a little proud of it and a little ashamed of it. If you are too, consider fighting in front of the kids. If that man had a large audience around his little table and chair and his "women are bad drivers" sign, I might at that point walk up, turn to the audience, deliver my devastating insurance company line, and then walk away. I would never engage with him. I consider that like the Facebook post where the troll puts something up and it's so easily knocked down, but it's getting all of these comments and you're pissed that enough people are like falling for it. All you need to do is leave the link to the accurate information and then fade away. You're not spending any time and energy on it. You're definitely not going to change the mind of the poster. But any of the audience who might have been taken in now has a link to that New York Times article that actually totally undermines everything that was in the post, and you haven't wasted any time. So that is my one caveat for when and how to engage with the opposition. Otherwise, simply let it go. If these are friends and family and you want to talk about what to do there, we can do that later. I'm not telling you to never speak to your father. But do not waste, like, understand your own resources and don't waste them on somebody who will not listen. These are the people we want to actually focus on. These are your neighbors. They may disagree with you on some stuff. They might have heard some disinformation. That's frightening. There's a lot of bad information out there. If I believed half of it, I would be terrified. These are good faith people. These are probably folks who don't spend a lot of time thinking about politics because most of us don't. These are the people that we want to find common ground. We want to ask them a ton of questions. What are they most concerned about? We want to figure out what concerns we share. And it's probably a lot, right? If they're afraid of, kids learning being taught inappropriate things in school, that's probably a fear that you share. None of us want kids to be taught inappropriate things in school. If they're worried about if they want to not have any gun regulations because they're very worried about violence and crime, well, you are probably also worried about violence and crime. So hearing their concern, realizing, like, if we're just talking, like, if their concern involves like safety for their kids, you share that concern. You might not come to the same conclusions about it, but you share that concern. So you're going to find that common ground, you're going to meet their concern, and then where you diverge on tactics, instead of saying but, you're going to say that's why. I also care about kids getting age-appropriate information in school. That's why I support comprehensive sex ed. I am also concerned about crime. That's why I want background checks to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. We all want kids to feel safe at school and have opportunities to learn. That's why I don't want to ban books. So you're finding the concern, you're sharing the concern, and then you're telling them that that shared concern is what has led you to the things that you support and the values that you have. And then you're going to stop and you're going to listen to what they say back. The third group of people, these are the easy ones. These are the ones where you're like, I would think this, and they're like, yes, sister. Like, you know right away, you have a buddy. That's not good enough. What you're gonna do when you find one of those is make it urgent, like tell them why it matters right now. Make it local, tell them why it matters to their community. Because again, even if you're super involved, nobody knows everything about the bonds and millages in their own community. Nobody knows about everything that's happening at the school boards. You have information that your neighbors and friends want. So make it urgent, make it local, and then recruit. Tell them about red, wine, and blue. Have them come to a meeting. If somebody is with you on every point, then they should be a part of the club. And I want to take a little moment to add here. Don't forget men. It turns out actually we got our data back from 2024, and it turns out the conversations that we are having with men, I mean the majority of the conversations that we have are women to women, but a few of us included men in our rally contacts, and it turns out we were really pretty persuasive. Men really they turned out considerably more if we had the conversations that we were having with them. So don't change a thing, but do recognize that you have a lot of power and sway with the men in your lives who love you. And when you find one that agrees with you, make sure they know how important they are in the fight. So if we go back and review the few things that I want you to remember is stay focused. It is about your town. It is not about Washington, D.C. As soon as you're talking about Washington, D.C., you are off base, bring it home. Ask questions. There's so much bad information about this out there. What is it that you're most concerned about? And then listen. And remember, don't repeat the disinformation. Say no, or that isn't true, or even, I don't know about that. Totally fine. You don't have to knock it down, especially if you're not sure you can. I don't know anything about that. What I do know is find common ground, find the concern that you share, and acknowledge the bad actors. Let people know, like there's a lot of people out there trying to confuse and scare parents, but our kids, again, this line that's going to be so helpful, are worth more than politics. So I think that's the end of my slide. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then we'll have tons of time for Q&A, because I know that's where you all get to tell me the like particular things that you're going through. And I really want to make sure that it's applicable. I want to make sure that I'm helping you all have the conversations that that you're having. So thank you, Julie, for looking through the chat for me. I'll do my best while we're talking too. But I
No
can't in
worries.
presentation mode. It drives me nuts.
So one of the first things that came up while you were giving the stats was, well, if we all are in agreement, then why are these folks still voting for politicians who legislate against repro rights and LGBTQ, issues?
Well, when I say that they need to scare and confuse us in order to retain political power, that's what I'm talking about. Like there is a lot of disinformation out there around abortion, right? Even when we talk about abortions later in terms, like they're they're making stuff up. Like they are using language that has no basis in reality, but is quite frightening. And
Mhm.
if I wasn't spending a lot of time thinking about it, I might think, "Oh my gosh, that's happening. I don't want anything to do with that." And vote against my own interests without even realizing that that's what I'm doing. So like it is a strategy because it works. The way that it's combated is with people like us having the conversations that we need to have. So yeah, it's tough. And then of course there are more people who genuinely believe what the extremists believe than we want in this country. There are more people who believe in white supremacy than we want in this country. But the vast majority of people don't. They have, however, been breathing the air and reading the news and hearing the disinformation and hearing about how controversial all of these issues are, and things get extremely scrambled, which is the point.
They said, how do you combat all the people who vote a singular way because everyone they know does it and they're afraid of being ostracized?
Yeah, this is a big one. I mean, this is where your conversations become the most important, because then they know they're not alone. Like when we have a Trouble Nation group in a deep, deep red area, like, and they just have an activation, they have a 12-person pride parade, they have a single table at the library. Like what that does is tell countless people the number of times that a woman says to us, my God, I thought I was the only one. Like, there will be 100 people in a town that all say, my God, I thought I was the only one. So you
Mhm.
have identified a very, very important thing. And the way to combat that is to create the space to let them know that they're not the only one. To share your values, be proud of your values, be open and listen to what other people have to say, but you believe in what you believe because you want a world that's good and safe for kids. You want things to be welcoming. You want people to be treated with respect. And, you assume that your friends and neighbors probably do too.
There's a question in here. We've got family members, and this comes up every time we do this talk.
Mm.
Would like some perspective on how to deal with division within families. In this person's case, it's two brothers and sister-in-laws are not speaking to the parents, and it's rough, and they're stuck in the middle. And I think that that's happening in a lot of families across the nation, because this administration regime, whatever you want to call them, is kind of not kind of is very dividing.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like the division is like that's part of the strategy. If we're all talking to each other, we're all going to figure out how much common ground we have, and that can't happen. Um, for that particularly difficult thing, like I'm going to channel my therapist for a moment and remind us that we are not in control of other people's emotions or decisions.
Mhm.
You don't have to be in the middle of your brother and sister-in-law and your parents. You have to navigate your own relationship with your parents and your own relationship with your brother and sister-in-law, but it is not on you what their relationship is with each other. So take that mental load off of your plate. You have enough. You already have a division in your family. You are already either having a tough time communicating with the parents or the brother and the sister. I don't know which side of the political divide each couple is on, but you have enough going on. So you don't have to negotiate that. And you don't have to take on the burden of what they must be feeling. Just create the space to have the conversations with anybody who wants to have them with you and navigate that relationship as what's best for you. Like what feeds your soul. If it makes sense to opt out of Christmas because it's just too difficult to deal with it, then like this is the year that you do that. If you can handle both of them, but not when they're at the same place because then it's okay to make those decisions. Like think about what you need and think about what you can control, and absolutely don't try to control the things you can't.
Well, and then I saw another one, and then we'll pivot to outside of family. But someone was asking about what do you do with adult children who are busy. They share your values and your views, but they're just they don't get involved.
Yeah.
And that's I know that's one of the reasons why we're here to begin with, is because we wanted to reach that audience of initially suburban women, but now everyone
Yeah.
who says I'm not political.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
well,
do that.
this is the question that I really want to jump into because, like, how do we handle people who are dyed-in-the-wool MAGA? It's tough, but like, we let them go. When we're talking about people who just aren't political, like, it's very difficult to argue with that. Politics is terrible. It's awful. Who wants to think about politics? Like,
Right.
so what we want to do in that case is be gentle. Like, we're not telling somebody that they need to get political is never going to make them do the thing that they want to do. Asking them about their values, asking them how, if you know that your adult child is absolutely pro-gay, like, has gay friends, has officiated a gay whatever, all of that, like, ask them, how are those values showing up in their lives? If they're not voting, what are they doing? Like, how does that, and then listen to the answers. Tell them when something really matters to you, especially if it's a local election that they might not know about otherwise. Of course they know that the presidential is happening, and of course they probably know that you have strong feelings about it. But if you have really strong feelings about the state Supreme Court race, they likely don't know that that's happening. And that could be a really interesting way in to, I mean, your kids better than anybody else. So what's the thing that might hook them that's on the line you know, with a judicial appointment? Like, you know, if they care about abortion rights, would that be the kind of thing that gets them? You don't ever have to be a cheerleader for politics. That's never going to win anybody over at all. What you're trying to do is gently give people the on-ramp um, for participating in our democracy, for voting mostly. That's sort of like table stakes for participating in our democracy. But you know, most people want to do right by their community. Most people care about the people around them, and when you tell them that this is something that matters to you and give them a little bit of education and then ask them about it and like agree with them. When somebody's like, "Oh, I don't want to think about politics." Yeah, of course. Your job is not to change their mind about politics. Your job is to tell them what the stakes are in any one election, and in a personal way, both to you and to what you know about them.
But Jess, both sides tell lies. How do I know who's telling the truth?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you don't really need, this is where we don't really need to parse that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, there's a lot of bad information out there. So that's why we need to focus on what's happening right here at home. And what we know is that when we want schools to create a welcoming environment for everybody, that means that we need common sense school board candidates. And I'm happy to share with you who that slate is in your area if you're interested. But like I get it on the national politicians. But like let's focus locally. Let's focus at home. And like people can argue with stats, people can argue with facts. They cannot argue with your lived experience. So if you have a reason for believing something, if you have a story to share, share it. They can't tell you otherwise. That has nothing to do with whether politicians lie. That's just your lived experience and wanting to vote for conditions that would have made that better.
So, someone was asking, how do we clarify the distinction between a civil violation versus a criminal violation in the context of the show of these violent arrests of immigrant folks and migrants, and the fact that they're arresting people who were exactly following the law in terms of, coming over here, asylum, all of the things. I mean, they even arrested some folks who are actually citizens. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't bother with the distinction between civil and criminal. What I would say is that we have seen attacks on immigrants who were longstanding pillars of the community. If you have immigrants in your life, like if there are folks at your school, at your workplace, in your family, if you know people who are scared, who should not be scared because they are not criminals, that's the story I would tell there. Everybody has seen on the news what's happened. It's even the people who were very supportive of his immigration policy are now walking it back a little bit because nobody thought they were going to be coming for hairdressers and, the gardener who's been here for 40 years, and everyone's so shocked that that's what's happening now. So I think rather than like explaining the leak, because you'll always get tied up in knots because the goalposts are going to be moving. So even if you get the difference between criminal and civil right now, when they start arresting citizens, that distinction goes right out the window. So I think talk about the people in your life. Talk about if you have kids who have friends who are afraid, talk about that. Really, the more that you can bring it to your own lived experience, and like you just want people treated with respect and decency. Like when somebody's coming at you with a bunch of facts and figures and you don't know if they're right or not, it is fully okay to say, I don't know about any of that. I just want people treated with respect and decency. And if you're talking to one of those second two groups, the good faith groups, not the opposition, that's something you can find common ground on. That's something you can move on. I don't want you to think about like debating their points. That's not the tough conversations that we're talking about having here. I hope that answers the question. It was a good one.
Now, someone asked a question about online trolls and what to do when they come for you.
For you. Woof. Yeah, I'm sorry for anybody who that has happened to. It has happened to me. It sucks.
Same.
I would shut it down. I would take whatever social media, like how long is this gonna last, right? Like are we talking about like a couple of people, or are we talking about like whoops, a really bad account retweeted you and now you're getting swarmed. Let me address them in two, just in case you were talking about either. Getting swarmed is an easy one. If all of a sudden your Facebook is blowing up because all of these strangers are commenting things on it, just go ahead and take that off of your phone for a few days. You can go ahead and like deactivate your account briefly. You can do any of that stuff. You can have a friend go through your private messages so that you don't have to see what's there. Have a friend look at it just in case there's a threat or something that needs to be dealt with, but remove yourself from it if possible. I have a friend I do this for. She does it for me. But it does pass, you know, and the less that you get sucked into it, like when you're reading bad comments at night, they've won. So the less you're sucked into it, the better it is, the more you'll be able to bounce back. If it's one or two that are on your page, I would ignore unless you think they're doing a really good job of influencing everybody else. Usually trolls, especially if they're not like an anonymous troll, they're like a crank that you happen to be Facebook friends with. They usually do a pretty good job of outing themselves. And you don't really have to do anything other than like, I mean, let's borrow from our Southern friends here and just bless your heart. Like you don't really have to get into it. Whatever makes you the sanest is the right way to deal with trolls. Maybe you've had a really crappy day and all you want to do is unload on somebody and you are going to feel great when you shut the computer and you go like, go ahead. But for the most part, like you don't think you have to do anything. You really don't.
What do you, how do you handle folks who just feel like their vote doesn't count?
Yeah, I mean, that's really tough. I would tell them about how many elections are won and lost on a single vote. And then what that actually means, you know, because I think that my vote doesn't count thing comes in two flavors. And one is there are 300 million people in the country who really cares whether or not I vote. And then there's the my vote doesn't count, nothing ever changes, it doesn't matter who wins. And those, I want to know which direction they're coming from, because if they're coming from the I am one among 300 million, who cares? Well, then I can tell you about the Virginia state legislature that was decided on a coin flip. Like there are hundreds of elections all over the country that are, I worked on a Senate race that was a United States Senate race, a whole state that was decided by 312 votes. And that wound up being the 60th senator. Like it made, like it gave Obama a supermajority. Like those 312 votes mattered. So we wouldn't have Obamacare without those 312 votes. So it's not just like, so that brings us to the other side, which is that it's not just that like somebody wins and somebody else loses. Major policy gets enacted because, I mean, elections matter. That is a saying for a reason. So if you care about book bans, then go ahead and vote. You know, it is very likely that that school board race is going to come down to a handful of votes because that happens all the time. More and more likely the lower down the ballot you get. So probably they just haven't thought much past the presidential. Most people, when they think about voting, they're thinking about voting in a presidential election every 4 years. And yeah, your vote counts less there than it counts and then depending on what state you're in, your vote counts even less. So like remind them how much is on the ballot that is not presidential and how few people actually vote in these elections and how much is riding on the state Supreme Court and who controls the state legislature and your school boards. Like these things are have the most impact on your daily life. Like the experience that your kids have at school really has very little to do with the United States Congress. It has a lot to do with your legislature, your governor, and your school boards. And that's where like your vote could not possibly matter more. So hopefully they listen to you and you know, try to listen back. I have to like remind myself to like stop talking. Like, you know, like don't just give them all of the facts. Stop and listen.
So how do you get these convos started with folks? You know, both folks you know, and then some that you don't know as well. How do you start these conversations?
I mean, local context, I think is good. You know, if you all are if your parents at the same school and you're talking about a school policy, like that's a great way in. If you think that somebody, you know, if you like somebody, but you've literally never talked about this stuff and they how your week was. Tell them you went to a really interesting training on Thursday about how to talk to people about values and the issues that matter to you in your community. See what happens. Bring up a red wine and blue event. Like, if somebody's talking about how, it's so hard to make friends as an adult, here's a perfect way in. It doesn't have to be politics. You don't have to talk about issues at all the first couple of times you talk about it.
I think the first couple of times is the key
Yeah,
as well.
this is a
You talk to them
learning.
more than once. This isn't one and done.
Yeah, I think this is a very, like, when people think about having conversations, we think about door knocking, at least if you've thought about like political conversations for a while. And that's really like, you've got however many minutes with this person as this person is willing to give you, and you have to make your best pitch right there. That is not, it doesn't really work all that well. Like, that's why we have to knock on so many doors to get that. Like, it's not the best return on investment. What we are talking about here is a very different thing. It is using the trust that you have built in these relationships. And it's not just like, this is my sister-in-law, and so she trusts me because I watch her kids. This is like, you trust me because I'm a face that you see every day when you're walking the dog. We might never have even talked, but you know that I am out, drinking my coffee on the porch every morning, and we've been waving. Like, it can be that kind of thing. So, have you heard about X local news thing? Did you know about X local election coming up? You don't even have to tell them how to vote. Just ask them if they know that the election's coming up. These can be very, very low pressure asks. And like, hanging out in fun events is like a really neat way in. And then if somebody's like, oh no, I hate politics, you can be, so do I. Actually, so does everybody at Red Wine and Blue. That's why they're doing it differently.
There were a couple of, when we were talking about, down ballot races, so very critical, but there were a couple of questions about upper ballot rather, races and president specifically. How do you, the question was like, how do you talk with someone about not voting party just for party when you get, like our current state of affairs, when, that's going to be detrimental to X, Y, and Z. So how do you do that? Do you make it local? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely make it local. Like, talking about partisanship isn't the best arrow in your quiver. Talking about like why, and frankly, the presidential is the hardest one to talk to people on. And that's because like the zone is flooded. Like, it is saturated. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody is feeling it. Like, it's people shut down when you start to talk about it. Like, I don't want you to put your time and energy there. I want you to put your time and energy into giving people an on-ramp to participating in this stuff. And that easy on-ramp is never going to be the presidential. It's going to be something far more local. So, I think the way to do the question, how do you get somebody to not, is to talk about the values. If you know that this is a rock-ribbed Republican who cares deeply about personal liberty, then I might approach that by saying, I also care deeply about personal liberty, and it's why I am hoping that just on this part of the ballot, you would be willing to consider voting for somebody other than the Republican, because that Republican is really coming for my personal liberty, my ability to like decide when and whether to have a kid, my ability to like make sure that my kids are reading classics in school, my ability to get the health care that I want. Like, my personal liberty is really at stake there. So I'm just going to put that out there as a request from me, that you would at least just give it a little thought based on your values, that maybe this time you need to have a different thought. So like, that's how I would do it in that, but like, please don't put your time and energy into the presidential. It is so much more return on investment, cost efficient, all of that, to look down the ballot where we're just like leaving it on the table. Like, people just don't realize how important and how like look at Florida, like look at the don't say gay stuff that's happening in Florida, and you can see, and it was happening under Biden and it's happening under Trump. You can see what happens with your state and local government. Like, those kids in Florida are dealing with that because of Ron DeSantis and the state legislature and the attorney general. They are not dealing with that because of the United States Congress and Senate. So when you really want to make a difference, like if you really care about the immigrants in your community, calling your senators and saying support bipartisan, immigration legislation is fine and good. Or even calling your senators and saying, I hate everything that ICE is doing, and I think that it shouldn't be legal, and they shouldn't be able to wear masks, and they shouldn't have all this funding, and I hate it. Good, fine. The immigrant in your community is probably going to feel better about your efforts if you have gone to the school and asked what their policy is if there's an ICE raid, and what they're doing for the kids of parents who might get caught up in this. And if somebody sees something, what should they do? What kind of bystander training is happening in your community? Like, as an immigrant in the neighborhood, I'm going to feel a hell of a lot better about my neighbors taking those kinds of actions than I will about them making a couple of calls to their senators, which, one, I probably never know about, and two, won't change anything. The other stuff really might.
So it sounds to me like, really listening and finding common ground will make people actually come back to you. It's about building and establishing that relationship, strengthening it if you already have one. That seems to be what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
I see one thing in here that I wanted to address. Liza said, when I say I don't know about that, my person will respond by lecturing me on that. And this is why it's important not to end on a period when you say, I don't know about that. You're going to say, I don't know about that. What I do know is, or I don't know about that. The thing that keeps me awake at night, or, like, honestly, I don't care about that. The thing that I think about is my kid. And my kid is scared at school because X, Y, and Z is happening. I couldn't care less what Trump or the podcast bros are saying. Honestly, it just doesn't do it for me. Like, go ahead and just say, that's not it for me. The thing that I really care about, and the thing that I want to know whether or not you care about, is X. And if you've been going at this and you just keep hitting a brick wall with someone who wants to lecture you about disinformation, whoops, you've wound up with a change my mind guy. End the conversation. Be like, hey, thanks for talking to me. This has been really interesting. I appreciate that we get to share viewpoints even when they don't agree. And I'm saying, if somebody's saying like terribly racist stuff to you, please don't thank them for sharing their viewpoint, even if you don't agree. It is fully okay to say, that kind of language doesn't work around me, or I'm sorry, I really think everybody deserves to be treated with respect, and so I'm not going to have this conversation. Like, stand on your values. But if you get into a back and forth where they really want to debate a thing that you don't want to talk about, let it go.
Yep.
It's tough. I hate letting things go. I hate it.
Yeah, me too.
It's
Yeah.
really, it's hard. But
yeah,
like,
I've
I
been
have
caught
to
up in a good
remember,
argument more than once.
right. And then but it's like, but I have 6 more points. Damn
That
it.
part.
Like, you can't end this conversation yet. I haven't landed my haymaker. And like, that is not actually
So I
how
said, I just want to go for the jugular. Yeah.
right. And that is
Depends on the day, Liza. Me too.
not what we're doing. We're not going for the jugular. We are creating a safe on-ramp for people to talk about their values.
Well, we are getting close to time. Is
Oh
there
my gosh, that was so
anything?
fast.
I know it did. It has gone really fast. Is there anything else you want to share with us? A couple last minute things or anything?
No, I just want to thank everybody for what they're doing. I saw a postcard thing go by, and I just want to suggest send postcards to your friends. The thing is, talking to the people that you know. Like, that is the secret sauce here. It's not having the conversation perfectly. It's the connection between you and the person that you're talking to. Every human being is a special flower, and it is a different message that will work for every single person. There is no like one thing that's going to happen. So the thing that matters is the relationship. So whenever you find yourself getting hung up about like, this is going to be so difficult, I'm going to have to debate this person, I need to memorize these statistics, I have to knock on all these doors, I have to write 1,000 postcards to the swing state, and yet, like, look to the people that you know, all of your networks, your work, your school, your sorority, every group chat you have, like your book club, everything is an organizing opportunity when you start thinking about it that way. You know, I was in a yoga class the other day. It wasn't even yoga, it was Pilates. It was even like even more basic than that. And the teacher, this was like last year, and the teacher said that she was going to be on vacation next week. And well, next week was the election. So in the middle of class, I'm like, well, have you made a plan to vote? And she's like, of course, I've already voted absentee, and so did my daughter. And it's like, well, okay, so now 12 other women just heard that there was an election. We didn't talk about who we were voting for. I didn't say anything. But I jumped on it. There was a moment. So think about like think about it in have more fun with it,
Well,
honestly.
and I always say that this is the tool right here. That's your best tool.
Yep.
Because everything that you need's in here. You know, everybody you need to call is in here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, write your postcards to the people who you know. Like it's like swing state people get inundated with strangers. It made a huge difference in the beginning, because people were unused to that. Now I live in a swing district in upstate New York, and oh boy, do you get a lot. But it matters when like a friend of mine will text. And you know, if I got a handwritten note from a friend of mine telling me that like a local election mattered, you better believe that I would vote and tell her that I'd done that.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. Julie, gonna tag you back in.
Somebody, I think it was Lorraine, commented that she wants more just time. So I was going to also tell you that we had done this presentation multiple times and it's never the same because we get lots of great questions at the end. So go on the YouTube channel, look for Tough Topics or Jess's name, and you can probably find more conversations with Jess. So
Yeah, feel free to skip my slides, but like well, you know what? Even those change.
a
Yeah,
little
they
bit,
do.
but yeah,
Honestly,
Yeah.
but the Q&A is always very different because I mean, you know how different it is now from January, from last June. It's like a new world every time I do this. So
Mhm.
yeah, things do
thank you
change.
all.
So, and we will definitely, people are saying Jess comes back all the time. We love to schedule Jess, so we will have her
These
again.
aren't cages, it's a bookshelf. Sorry. Final question I want to I want to clarify. I don't have tiny animals locked up behind me. It's just a bookshelf.
They ask if you have a YouTube or a podcast, Jess.
No, I used to have a morning drive time radio show that was a lot of fun that my co-host continues to have. So plugging mornings with Sterlina Maxwell on Serious Progress. But right now I live on Instagram and Blue Sky pretty much.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and thank you to Jess, obviously. Lots of love in the chat. And we will see you hopefully soon at another event. Maybe next Thursday would be our next event. So,
Mhm.
okay. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night all.